The views are those of the I'm sorry. Okay, take 20.
However, the directors and producers are responsible for destroying the stereotypes that are all too often related to Star Wars fans. Think you got it?
Sure, if you say so.
Wonderful.
We asked about 3,500 Star Wars fans what about their lives. Who are you? What's your social experiences like? And what we found out was Star Wars fans are anything but the stereotype.
There's a seducing nature to it. It's not this stark, bad versus evil choice. It's complicated. There's a half-truth in it. And that's what you see in the way the dark side is portrayed. I mean, you look at the character of Anakin and his struggle and his bitterness and his anger, and how the more that festered within him and bitterness took root in him, the more he moved towards the dark side. It was a gradual progression. It wasn't, he woke up one day and said, I'm on the dark side.
My favorite Star Wars movie is Yoda.
And learn what you have learned. Judge me by my size, as well you should not, for my ally is the Force.
We were passionate about it, and we had volunteers from the local Denver area that were Star Wars fans that were involved, and the one thing too, our event almost got canceled 2 weeks before it happened, and the reason for that is that we were planning the whole event. It was ready to go. We'd sold advance tickets, and then 2 weeks before our event, the Columbine shootings happened in Denver. They called me up to say, we're canceling it. This is such a terrible thing that they thought it would also, that it just didn't feel right, and that it would look bad for them to be throwing this party in Denver when 2 weeks earlier, these kids were all killed at this school.
Started with me with my brothers, going there. I think they saw it about 10 times. I came with them about maybe 6 or 7 of those times. And they were like 12, 13 at the time. And they just said the same, they said, hey, cool ships and lightsabers. And I'm like, okay, cool. And of course, when you see it at 5 years old, it's the coolest thing ever. I would say right around when the special editions came back out is when I kind of went back into Star Wars. I mean, probably went down to a lull in the late 80s, early 90s. But when the special editions came out again, you don't realize how much you liked Star Wars until you see it again tweaked.
All the girls wanted to be Princess Leia. All the guys wanted to be Han Solo or, what's his name, Luke Skywalker. I always wanted to be a stormtrooper. I mean, that's a childhood dream. I was 7 years old at that point, and I got to the age where, I had a job, I had money, and I could be that stormtrooper. I didn't even know about the 501st at that point. I just bought it because I wanted to be able to be a stormtrooper. I think that people that dress up that are not part of the 501st should have every right to do it, and I look forward to learning something from them. I just want them to know that they're not part of the 501st until they are.
There was footage there from the third movie that had previously not been seen, a lot of lightsaber fights against blue screen. Basically, I videotaped it, and when I got back home, I put it on our local garrison boards in the private section to share with the local friends of mine that couldn't have made it, but normally would have if they could have. So, and I asked them to please don't show anyone, that this is just for them. By the next day, it was around the entire internet.
We're not really just a collecting site. We're not the average collecting site. We try to focus in several areas and different facets of Star Wars collecting and the Star Wars community.
An average vintage collectible that's out there in the hundreds of thousands, and you're turning that into an item where there's only literally a handful in the world. The desire to own something unique is what's driving the price and the rarity of it.
Of course, you gotta buy the stuff. So I mean that can take anywhere from getting up at 7:30, so you're right there at the store when the store opens at 8, and you make the whole circle run, or you didn't find anything, so you're gonna stretch, maybe go out to an out of the way Target or Walmart to kind of maybe find something there, and that can take all morning.
I grew up in a pretty rough family situation, and Star Wars gave me values as a kid that I didn't get from parents, and growing up without a religious family. So I learned about good and evil from Star Wars, and it did change my life.
Autistic people typically don't play a lot. They just end up by themselves a whole lot, and Star Wars for some reason brought Alex out of his shell. He liked the music, he liked the toys, and it was one of the first things that the two of us got to play with together. He'd hear the music, he'd pick up the toys, and we'd play a scene for the movie, or he'd rehearse a line from the movie, and we'd play different parts, and it was one of those fun kind of father-son things that we finally got to play together, and I never knew if we would or not.
I think we will show the prequels first before going into the original sagas.
Like, I never really saw the old movies before I saw the new movies, and I just thought the new movies were cooler.
I grew up loving the original Star Wars movies. And then George Lucas steps in and says, oh, well, this is how I wanted it to be. And so he changes it to how he wanted it to be. But it's not really what the fans ended up wanting it to be. And I think he should have took that in consideration, because those movies made hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars as they were. For him to change them and say this is how they're going to be now is not fair at all to fans. It's almost just like a kick in the face to every Star Wars fan, as far as I'm concerned. For him to overdub, put Tamora Morrison on Boba Fett's voice, on the DVDs that came out, is garbage. For him to put Hayden Christensen over Sebastian Shaw is just ridiculous. And I would like to talk to George Lucas about that and maybe give him a good whack in the face.
Well, you may have noticed if you're looking at the surroundings here, we are actually in the hotel that Lucasfilm and his crew were at in March 1979 when they shot the battlefield of Hoth in The Empire Strikes Back. So we are actually in Finse in Norway, and it was quite a treat getting here. It was 4 hours and a half on a train from Oslo to Finse, and the view from the train, the mountain ranges, the snow, it was amazing. Well worth it. We've already been on the glacier yesterday, and it's just totally stunning. Even though you're freezing even though it's very cold and freezing outside, it's worth every minute. You forget your troubles like this. You're out there and you're seeing the snow caps and you're seeing the imagery, and you have this photo guide that you created, and you're like, oh, this is where the Probot crash landed, and all of a sudden you're back in there in that adventure, and that's what you're here for, and all your troubles are easily forgotten. It's like you're crossing some kind of boundary, you're leaving Earth behind, and all that you know and all that you love is you leave it behind, and you're exploring new horizons with new friends, and you all have one goal: to find what you've been looking at in your TV screen all these years, to find Hoth. That's what we're here for. And being out there with the freezing cold, but the clear sky and the sun is on your face, and it's just magic. It's hard to describe, it's hard to put into words. But you're out there with these people that you have only known for a couple of days, and immediately it's like you've known each other for years, because you have one main language, which is Star Wars. That's the main language, Everybody knows, even though I've never met you before in my life, we are both talking and appreciating this landscape, and we're both looking at the same thing that we've been looking at for 20 years on a television screen, and now we're looking at it for real. And it creates a bond, even though we've never met before. We're instant friends.
In the first movie, Han is this selfish, self-centered guy who is only into things for himself. And so you get to this crucial point in the movie where everybody's coming together to